Cathryn, welcome to the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm very, very well. And we're just saying off air, I think, first and foremost, congratulations.
Thank you. I just announced that I was pregnant to everyone. So now I am about to go into a whole new chapter of life, which I'm excited about. And as an entrepreneur, I'm also like, oh, what ideas am I going to come up with now that I have a whole new perspective on life?
And I can see the card deck over your shoulder, which I have here, but that won't make sense to people just yet if people are coming into the podcast. So I'd just like to kind of help people understand what great work you do in the world. And I know that we'll talk about the projects or the project or the company that you run now, but I understand that you've always had this entrepreneurial heart set mindset. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I actually grew up in Belfast, Northern Ireland, and I did not grow up knowing that you could have your own business or I just grew up, you go to university, you get a job. And so I kind of followed that track. I went to university, I became an architect. But, when I was in high school, I had an eBay store and I was learning how to set up an online store, which is just funny how I ended up now. But I think throughout there's like little glimpses of, I'm selling cupcakes on the playground when I'm 7, but I never thought you could actually like run your own business. And so when I moved to the US in I went for the summer in 2011, and then I got a job in 2012. And when I moved there, it was really a whole new world of like moving to New York City and like becoming like working as an architect. But then I'm introduced to this whole world of personal development and like people, there's much more of a culture of like working on yourself. And when you work on yourself, you generally do better in life, is what I started to realize. And so I just kind of was looking like, oh, why didn't I learn any of this at school? Like, I was so inefficient with time, and like I used to pull all-nighters in uni all the time, and that's part of architecture school, but also just didn't know about like habits or anything like that. And I'm just thinking I would be so far ahead if I had known this stuff earlier. And so, for a few years I was just kind of working on myself. And your podcast, the name of it is exactly what I believe. It's just like constantly getting better every single day, even if it's just a tiny bit. It's that whole like 1% better. Well, you're like 237 times better in a year if you just focus on that little step every single day. So yeah, I mean, that completely changed my life in every way.
Yeah, I love that. And I understand that the birthing of BestSelf Co company is because at first you had a need for the product that you started with. Talk to us about what it was that I've never been a journaler. Like I dabbled. I mean, I absolutely love the card prompts. That's my bag, the coaching and facilitating. But what was the gap that you initially saw?
So for me, I had always just struggled with, first of all, endless to-do lists. I would make to-do lists that like if everything in my day went perfectly, like so streamlined, I still wouldn't be able to get the stuff that I would put on there done. And so you're setting yourself up for failure every day because you work all day. Then at the end of the day, because you already set yourself up for failure, you're basically creating a bad relationship with yourself because you are not telling yourself that you don't do what you say you're going to do. And even if you set yourself up for failure, you couldn't possibly do that anyway. And so what I realized is like sitting down before I open my laptop in the morning and just simply like, okay, what are the things that you want to do today? I even have a post-it on my laptop says, do not open this until you know what you're going to do with it, because it's just this void of like your time just gets sucked into it, and you have to be really intentional. And so back in like 2014, I had started keeping just a moleskin journal and like, writing down the hours on what I wanted to do. But because I came from a design background, like that's kind of annoying to keep having to do every day. So I'm reading all these books and I'm putting this framework into place. And then I'm like, oh, let me just design this into something. And when it came time to actually like, oh, I should print this, it was really expensive. So I'd done a couple of crowdfunding campaigns for another business that I had. And I was thinking, everyone I showed it to, they were like, oh, I want one of these. But I didn't have the money to just like, throw up a print run. So I'm like, let me crowdfund it. And the whole structure of the self journal, which is the first product that we started with, was a 3-month based goal journal. So you start with a sort of end in mind, and 3 months is a short enough time where you can't procrastinate, but it's long enough to actually get something done. So instead of, January 1st, like, what am I going to be doing in December 31st? Can you imagine doing that in 2020? Like, the whole world's completely different. And so 3 months is a good enough time to do that. And then every single day you start with gratitude, you plan your day, you end the day like looking back and reflecting on, what you learned that day. And so when we launched on Kickstarter, it just kind of blew up, and in a good way. And so I realized that I'd gotten some traction with this, and this is the thing I should focus on, because actually it was the thing that I was also the most passionate about, which was funny because, in entrepreneurship, you can chase ideas and like, oh, what's going to make money? And I feel like this was the first thing that, like, I didn't really care if it made money. I just wanted it to exist for myself. And then it was a thing that like really took off. So from there, we've just constantly worked on, okay, what are the different areas in people's lives? And I called it Best Self because, I didn't want it to be a journal company specifically. I wanted it to be a problem first company, which is like, okay, what's the problem we're solving with the products? And sometimes we can solve problems without having to sell someone a product. And so that's what I try to teach the team is like, okay, does this have to be a product, or could this be a video or like content or something else? And now we've worked on, okay, relationships, productivity. And we very much started with productivity. It was very like, I think this is generally how, maybe it's a millennial thing, but you're like so focused on your career and your goals and like type A, like, let's do it. And then you get to a certain point in your life when you realize, like, for me, I'm like hitting all these goals, but I'm realizing, oh, there's actually a huge part of my life that's not fulfilled at all, which was like in my relationships. And so that's what made me realize, oh, I should be focusing more on this now, because while the business goals and all that are very like outwardly looking amazing, but if you don't have anyone to like celebrate it with and like truly feel close to, I felt like it was like a hollow victory. So that's when we started going into, the intimacy deck and the relationship journal, something we just came out with, and then, your relationship with your kids. Because if your relationships with your kids or with your family or with your friends are not good, it's hard to progress in life to where you want to be.
I in doing some research, I've heard some really interesting perspectives about the product experience that you've tried to create. And one of the things I've always found when I've opened products from your company is it's like an Apple unboxing. It's such a great experience. And I heard you describe the 3 areas of your product experience. And the first one you said was visceral. Like, what has been some of the intention that you've put behind some of your products?
I mean, we all know what it's like to open an Apple product. I'm like, I don't know about you, but I have all of my Apple product boxes in a closet. And when I lived in New York, I looked in this closet. I'm like, I'm paying rent to store empty boxes, but I couldn't bring myself to like throw them out. So for me, I was always thinking, like, when you buy these products, I want people to feel like it's an investment in themselves. And so that's why the opening experience was something I wanted people to be like, oh, wow, it's something they enjoy using and they wanted to use. Because if someone doesn't like the feel or look of something and it's not enjoyable, then they won't actually use it. And so any impact that you're trying to make with this product will not actually come true, because you haven't thought about the actual use case. And so there's 3 parts I think of with the product experience. There's like the visceral, which you explained is like that whole Apple thing. And then there's the educational part of like, okay, does someone know what to do right after they open it? Like, what do the first 10 minutes look like? Are they confused? Like, the last thing you want to do is have someone feel like a failure if they don't know how to use your product. And then the third part is how they sort of like the experiential, like how they think back on your product. So how, and then also what your product says about them, because that's the whole reason people, they wear brands the way they do. They put stickers on their laptop. It's like, this is me telling you who I am. And that's also why people will share stuff on social media.
Mm.
And if something looks good and feels good and has helped them, they're much more likely to share it on social media, because they're saying, look at me, I'm trying to be my best self, and this is the products that I buy to do that, which is great for them. And it's also great for you as a company, because it's promoting people to share your product without asking them to.
Yeah, it's great to hear you say that, because that was the heart behind calling my Facebook community "We Are Always Better Than Yesterday." It's an extension of ourselves and identity and community. One of the things I think I heard you do really well is through your Facebook group is you understand through the user generated content that many people were not starting journaling because they liked how pristine the original pages are. How did you take that learning and then use that as a feedback loop?
It's funny how you create this product that feels good to use, but then you have these perfectionists, who I am also that, where you don't want to write in it because, God forbid, you have like ugly handwriting, or some, you have something unclear. And so I think we created some content around just the idea of trying to be perfect is another way to procrastinate on doing something. And, writing, and I'm showing like my journal, there's like crossed out, there's like, some days it's just like something exploded in there. And so I think taking content and sort of, what are the objections of people not actually using your product, and creating content around the consumption of it. Because when people, our goal is like having people create a habit to actually do the product so that they get the benefit out of it. And so a lot of times when people will, or companies, they're trying to sell you the product the first time, but how do you make sure that people use the product in order that they come back and buy more, but also that they get into a habit of actually getting the benefit that you're selling to them, which they won't get if it's like intermittent and they're not actually creating a habit around it.
Mm. I love I listened to your podcast with the chap from the one thing, and they're on the core values experience that you did with your wife, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what are your core values?
So this exercise is when you pick out 3 words. We actually pick out 15 words, and then you have to break it down to 3 that are the sort of compass that you follow in your life. And you follow this even if you don't even know what they are. So it's better that you know what they are. And then you can look back and be like, oh, that's why that didn't feel right, or why that did feel right. So mine are curiosity, integrity, and impact. So curiosity is just what drives like learning new things, creating products. And whenever I feel like I'm in a rut or I'm not doing things that make me curious, that's when I realize, oh, I need to be changing something and doing something different. Because if I do that for long enough, I just kind of get bored and restless. Integrity is just doing what you say you're going to do, which is almost table stakes these days. But I think knowing what the right thing to do and doing the right thing, even when it's difficult, has been something that I definitely learned over the last few years, of this whole idea of your values are only values when they cost you something. So they're like they're like an idea you have about yourself, right? But if they're never tested, you never know, like, am I willing to walk away from something that I want in order to withhold these values? And that happened to me in like end of 2019, where I basically was like offered money, a bunch of it, and but I would have to give up values in order to do it. And I ended up walking away from it because it just didn't feel right. And there was a lot of stuff that the only thing that was good was the money, but everything else was negative. And so that's when I realized, oh, I actually would choose that over, something that I wanted in order to withhold those. So I think, and then looking back, there's things with like my wife where, when we first met, we had our different values, and we had a kind of a rough beginning. And so when we looked back at like things that we were just like not meshing on, it was because I'm coming with my value and she's coming with hers, and just that in the moment that we met, it wasn't meshing well. And so it just, when we were looking back, I'm like, oh, it's just because we were actually standing up for our values. And at that point, we were both confused about the intentions of the other person.
Yeah, powerful. That's really powerful. In planning this conversation, I don't plan too much, but I like to try and think about the experience that I want to give my guests. And because I knew that one of your values was impact, I want to give you an experience that helps you feel the impact of some of your products. So we're going to see how this is going to go. But if you're game, I'm going to ask you questions from this deck.
Okay.
It's going to be some fun, right? So this is the Little Talk, a tool for bigger conversations with children. And here's the thing. I think you're going to find for the next part of the conversation that it's not just children that we can have great conversations with. So you've got 6 categories. You've got random, hopes and dreams, likes, dislikes, reflection, self-expression, emotional intelligence. Would you like to pick a category?
You pick it for me.
Okay, let's go with reflection. So I've got a couple of cards here. Okay, this one. When do you get most distracted?
When do I get most distracted? Oftentimes when I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. So that if there's any ambiguity over a task, I will find something else to do. And I often get distracted between like 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. Those are like the dead hours where I'll decide to do something different because I now know how I work best, and those are not my productive hours.
Okay, next one, self-expression. What do you think that grown-ups don't understand?
Oh, I was about to say, as a grown-up myself, I'm like, am I grown up? I'm trying to put myself in the mindset when I was younger. I think one of the things probably is like you have the parental or like the adult relationships, but kids have their own relationships and like they're completely separate and like different thoughts than the adults have, and it's not an extension of someone else. It's completely different. So you have your whole like world going on. So that's something that I don't think I thought grown-ups do when I was growing up.
It's interesting, isn't it, when you opened the, with the fact that education didn't prepare you for, entrepreneurship, or even just, do you think, well, clearly you don't, because this is why you have a company, about just adults not knowing about how to be their best selves?
Oh yeah. I mean, how many adults, they have kids and they're like, oh, I die for my kids, but I won't live healthy. I won't eat healthy to live as long as possible to be with my kids, but I die for them. And so there's this mix up of like, and I think it's also, yeah, like you said, a lack of education, because we don't grow up in school learning this stuff. I mean, if you think of school, it came from this industrial time where basically you're training people to go into factories and work all day and do the same thing over and over again, which is not what we are doing now. Like if you think of like when I was growing up, you're playing video games, like you can never make a living doing that. It's like there's people making a lot of money literally streaming, playing video games. And so there's this whole other world where these new jobs and new economies have been created that the traditional school system has not caught up with at all, nor like, the health system. And so I think like questioning, like, okay, what am I doing? Like, what am I putting in my body? What am I, thinking about? When I went home, I have like a bunch of health friends here in Austin, and they always look at the ingredients of everything, which now I started doing. And so I went home and I'm, looking at the ingredients. I'm like, this is terrible. Like, and my family are like, it was just this weird thing where I realized how much I'd changed, because now I'm like kind of coaching them on stuff and they're just like, what are you talking about? Like, who looks at the ingredients?
Yeah. It's nice to be back in Austin. The last time I was in Austin, I was talking to Matthew McConaughey about his book, Green Lights. And the next question I have here is under hopes and dreams, what book would you write?
Oh, I get asked this a bunch of like, if I would write a book. I believe in writing a book when you have something like unique to say.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have a book in me right now that I would think about, but I think one of the things I teach people is just the idea of like, struggle and
Mm,
the negative or seemingly negative things in your life that actually are the things that make you grow more than anything.
mm,
And this concept of uh, we expect as people, we're brought up, on our birthday or on Christmas, we get gifts and they
mm-hmm.
come wrapped and our names on them. And in life, we don't get it like that. They come in however way they come. And if it
Mm,
seems negative in the moment, oftentimes it's so zoomed in. And when I look back at like things that in the moment seem negative, and then I zoom out and something else happened that would never have happened if it wasn't for that thing. And I'm like, oh, actually, that was a good thing. But if I was to just see that zoomed in, I would just be like, oh, that's bad. And so I think looking at everything, whether it's positive or negative in the moment, and thinking, okay, let's see, it's that whole, I don't know if you ever heard the story about the Chinese farmer. I'm not gonna butcher the story right now, but I will send you a link because we like
yeah.
made this cartoon of it for BestSelf, because I love this concept of, oh, that's great news. And the Chinese farmer's like, maybe so, maybe no, time will tell.
Mm,
And so every single thing, it's like, oh, this was negative, but it led to this positive. Oh, this was negative, it led to this positive. And so I think if we
yeah.
teach kids to not judge something in the moment as negative or bad,
Yeah.
and instead just as an experience, that what can they learn from it, then
Yeah.
they'll see the adversity in their life as like, oh, this is like I'm leveling up in a video game to the next thing.
Yeah. That's really powerful. And I think, I just want to allow that answer to come, and really resonate with people, because so many, whether it be coaches, entrepreneurs, whatever that might be, they think that the stepping stones of have I made it yet are to do a TEDx talk and to write a book. And I think, here you are, CEO of a multi-million-pound company, $1 million company, and you've just said you don't feel the need to write a book. And I think there's such peace in that, like intentionally saying, no,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. I mean, it's maybe at some point I would write a book, but like I said, there's so many books out there that could be a blog post.
Yeah.
And I think that it's really when you have a unique thing to say, and I don't feel like I have that. And I don't need it to use as an ego boost right now. So if you have there's great books out there, of course, but only do it if you really have your message and you want to spread it, is my belief.
Love that. Okay, random. What family traditions do you want to continue?
Ooh, family traditions. So at Christmas every year, my mom would always get us new pajamas on Christmas Eve. So that
Yeah.
I'll definitely do that one. One thing I really enjoy about living in the US is Thanksgiving,
Mm-hmm,
because it's like Christmas where everyone gets together, but there's no gifts.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So it's really like all about gratitude and like
Yeah, I love
great
that.
food and just being together. And so I've really enjoyed that aspect of having this whole new holiday that's only a month before Christmas that I get to enjoy, that's not driven by like, okay, what's I have to buy all these gifts for people. I mean, I love like buying gifts for people, but it's just like all the great things without any of the pressure.
Mm. Being type A, like, how do you feel when you get bored?
I mean, I'm never bored. I always find something to
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I do think that we should give ourselves an opportunity to be bored. So that's what I have to force myself to do sometimes, is like, go for a walk without listening to a podcast, God forbid, or
Mm-hmm.
like not trying to make every single part of your day productive,
Yeah.
which is something that's very like, oh, I need to make everything efficient. I need to be like doing this and learning this. And so something that you need to do is like let your mind wander by
Yeah.
not constantly distracting it or trying to make it consume all the time, because that's you're gonna stop yourself coming up with ideas. So I never get bored. but sometimes I have to like force myself to like get bored so that it like makes my idea machine work.
Mm. What sort of things kind of bring the creative out of you?
So I think, a lot of times I give myself constraints over things.
Mhm.
So um, I'll set a timer and be like, okay, try to come up with, X many ideas for a blog post or a video or whatever. And so I'll try to do something like that. I think like doodling, going for walks, again, without listening to a podcast, reading books completely, what are the best books in other industries that you could read and take what they're doing over there and apply it to
Mm.
here. Because a lot of times, especially in entrepreneurship, a lot of people read the same books.
Mhm.
And so if you're reading the same thing as everyone else, it's going to be harder to create something completely unique and different. And so if you are reading something about, I don't even know, art or
Mm.
psychology or
Mm.
something, then how can you take what you're learning over there and apply it to, e-commerce?
Yeah, and I think that's Matthew Said. He's a guy over here in England. He wrote a book called Rebel Ideas, which is about the modern form of innovation is taking two things that exist and seeing what they
Mm,
are: the internet and a taxi, Uber. For example, that's
yeah.
really powerful. Really
I
powerful.
actually got that book. My dad bought me that book. It was good, really good.
Yeah, good, isn't it? Another random question: what should we ban from the world?
Oh, I mean, I don't really believe in a lot of bans because people will get around it anyway. Um, what should we ban? I don't know what the right answer here is.
Good. Let's move on. So, emotional intelligence. What puts you under pressure?
Deadlines.
Yeah.
Um,
Self-imposed?
or mostly, or the team will impose them on me, which is good because I need that.
Yeah.
Um, pressure. I think running a business and having that sometimes it's like a battle between, like creativity and like the manager. It's like the maker manager type thing
Hmm.
where a maker schedule, you have hours and hours of time to just sort of come up with ideas and think. And then sometimes if I get stuck in the manager admin side too much, then I feel like pressured. But if I
Mm.
do too much of one thing, then I'm like, oh, what am I missing over here?
Mm.
So that's more self-imposed pressure. But I definitely think as an entrepreneur and a creator together, those are the things that sometimes I wrestle with.
Mm. Mm. Last question from the deck. It's all about reflection, and it comes from here. What do you love most about yourself?
Ooh, what do I love? My ability to figure stuff out, even when I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. Does that give you confidence? Like I've always used that saying in my own mind because I could just turn up and just wing it to some
Yeah.
degree because I'll just figure it out, right? Maybe I
Yeah.
get
I
too
think
confident.
like if, everything went away and I'm starting over again, I totally think I could create something because I will just the ability to I think actually I saw this recently is someone put Googling on their resume as like a skill. I'm like, that is a skill, like
Yeah.
it's no longer a skill to memorize all this useless knowledge. It's a
Yeah.
skill to be able to find the right answer to the question. And
Resourceful.
so yeah, so I think being resourceful is definitely it. And I mean, I came here to the US, I had like less than $1,000 to my
Mm.
name.
Mm.
And I was making, 30,000 when I moved here as an architect, working like
Mhm.
crazy hours. And, I started things on the side. I just was basically like hustling.
Mhm. Mhm.
And my wife now is funny because she met me, 2018, like January 2018. But by that time I'm, have figured stuff out and things are looking, much brighter than maybe when I started.
Mhm.
And then when we moved into our house, our water wasn't working for a bit. So I'm like literally going to the gym and filling up these like gallon things of water, because I'm like, I'm not
Yep.
paying for water that I'm gonna put like literally in the toilet.
Yeah.
And so she's saying, she's like, yeah, I mean, when we met, like you're kind of like bougie and like had figured stuff out, and then I saw you like basically, getting water and like being like basically like scrappy and figuring it out.
Yeah.
And she's like, and then I was like, oh, this girl like knows how to do it. I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's how I sort of started. You just saw me and the stock was higher when you got in, but I can still do all the same stuff.
I love that. You just figure it out. That's amazing. And we've not talked massively about the growth and the development and the leadership required to scale Best Self. Looking back, it's very easy to look back, but what do you think were some of the key things, from your own perspective, from your own leadership that have helped the journey so far?
I mean, I think, it's a journey for you, and the business generally will grow at the rate that you as an owner are. So if a business is growing, 100% year over year, which our company like first year grew, it did like 2.2 million, then it like tripled. And when I think of that, I'm like, did I triple as a person to be able to meet that growth? And so I find that the times where the business is just kind of plateaued, I think in like 2018, I was going through a bunch of like personal things at the time, or 2017. And so when I look at that, it's usually like, oh, I haven't grown as a leader and as a human. And that is why the business is not doing what it like growing at the rate that it used to do. And so whenever I talk about to team members or for myself, it's like, are you growing as a person at the rate the company is? Because if you're not, you're going to plateau, and the company is not going to be able to grow beyond that. And so that kind of keeps me on my toes. But I definitely, like, you should always be, trying to be better than yesterday. Like what are the skills that you need to learn? And sometimes as an owner and, a leader, it's not about me learning the skills, which is kind of sad because I love learning, but it's about like, how do I give my team the skills and the tools for them to learn this thing that we need in order to reach the next level? Because me doing it's not actually very useful. Even if I enjoy it, I am not going to be the one that's implementing this thing.
That's powerful. What do you look for in potential? Because if you just talked about the overall sum of the organization is the collective of the individuals, what do you look for in prospective hires? What characteristics? Is it values? How do you recruit?
So I never look at like grades or where they went to school or anything like that. So say I'm hiring a designer, I'm obviously going to look at their portfolio. I don't care if someone went to school, to be honest, because I went to school for architecture. I don't do anything to do with that now. So for me, I look for values and the ability to figure things out, and the ability to be both resourceful, but also not need to be micromanaged. So if you can manage your own time and you have an internal want to be great and have quality work, that's much more important, because you're not doing it just for the company, you're doing it for yourself. Like, I want to create quality work, whatever that looks like. And so when people have high standards for themselves for their work, then they'll have high standards for what they create for you. So you want to look at how they present themselves. You want to coach. I've actually found hiring people that already know the company, like customers. I think my COO was once a customer, and our product manager was once a customer. And at that time, when they were applying, you no longer have to teach them, okay, this is what the company does, because they're already bought in. And just that is half the battle of someone that believes in the mission enough to, like, almost any job can be like figured out. Maybe a designer, developer, supply chain management, you need someone with experience, but a lot of stuff, I've hired people that they didn't have any experience, but they had a lot of I'll figure it out. And I just gave them, okay, here's a bunch of courses to figure out how to do this thing. They did all that. They crushed it. And then they actually laughed, and now they're running a business doing that thing. So now they're doing well. They like learned all this stuff from working with us, and we got a good deal because they're coming in with barely any experience, but the ability to learn, and we're just teaching them how to do it. And so we both win.
Yeah, I love that. Something I ask all of my guests is, what does the phrase "always better than yesterday" mean to you?
For me, it's the idea of never stop improving, never stop learning. I think I thought this too whenever I left school. You're like, oh, I'm going to get a job, and then I'm done with school essentially. But I think the love of learning and wanting to know new things will just completely change your life. Like, again, I said this earlier in the interview, like me, reading on the subway on the way to work and like learning about personal development. I could still be in my architecture job making, $50K a year. And now I have a company, I hire people, and I create products and do all this stuff, not because someone said, oh, you should do this. It was like, oh, I was just started doing things for myself, and then created this whole other life that I never would have done had I not focused on, okay, how do I be better than I was yesterday?
I love that. I love that. And I'm excited for your next chapter. What are have you got things in mind that you want to do, release, deliver before going on maternity?
I mean, I'm struggling with the idea of maternity because I like love what I do.
Yeah.
But we have a bunch of new products coming out in the next few months. We have like this idea of, we talked about creativity, this doodle deck. So it gives you prompts, and then these ideas of like getting your mind to think differently. So a bunch of different products coming out. We have the relationship journal that's shipping soon. So I wonder what other ideas I'll have, becoming a parent for the first time. We do have, most of our team have kids. So we've worked with like child psychologists and other people on the team to create these products. But I'm thinking, what's the new perspective that I'll have, that I'll create something or have this idea for something completely different. So I don't know. I don't know what the maternity leave situation is going to be either. So learning it all as I go.
I love it. I love it. Excited. Well, I'd love to be considered an honorary team member of Best. Even if you need someone to make the coffees, like I'd love to be part.
Next time you're in Austin, come by the office.
Yes, that would be amazing. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for coming and talking to us about your organization. Thank you for letting me have a bit of fun with your deck. I love these. A number of our community here at Always Better Than Yesterday have gone and bought these. And I just hope that your colleagues get that ripple effect back of impact, because as you can see here, heart on the chest, it's connection, it's belonging, it's connection, it's being part of something. And what you do is you enable human beings to grow and connect and be the best versions of themselves, of which I think the world needs more of. So thank you for all that you do. I'll put all the links to your content in the show notes, and I'd just be honored if you'd leave us a final thought from your good self.
I mean, I think if people are listening to this podcast, they're already ahead of the game. You're already top of the 1% of people. And I think if you keep, focusing on making yourself better, even just, reading 20 minutes a day, or watching that YouTube video on something you want to learn, or just learning one thing a day, like where will you be in a year? So I'm on this train with you. Even now, whenever I find myself sort of stuck, it's usually because I haven't focused on, okay, what else new am I learning and getting better at.
Love that. My friend, all the best for your future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is awesome.